Welcome. We're happy you could join us for EPA's monthly Small Systems webinar series. Today, we are covering risk assessments, emergency response, and resiliency. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few items. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the webinar website within a few weeks. In the navigation bar on the right side of your screen, a PDF copy of the slides has been provided under the Handouts dropdown. If you experience audio issues or can't view the slides at any time during the webinar, you can let us know by typing in the questions drop box located on the navigation bar, or you can send an email to the GoToWebinar helpline. We will have a Q&A session at the end of both talks today. At any point during the webinar, feel free to ask questions for the presenters by typing in the questions drop-down box. For those who may have not been able to respond to the poll at the beginning of the webinar, if you have more than one person in the room with you, if you could please type that number in the questions box.
This is Michelle Latham, by the way, with Office of Research and Development. There are some upcoming webinars we wanted to let you know about. We've got drinking water training on December 5th. This is for lead service line ID and replacement webinar series. The focus is on large systems. I know this is a small systems webinar series, but we do have a lot of people join us from all size water systems. So if you're interested in this, you can register for that now. Also wanted to let you know the small systems webinar series, we are currently planning the 2020 schedule, but we also would love to have input from any of you who are interested. So if you have any ideas for speakers, or you would have a presentation that you would like to possibly give as part of this series, you can contact us at the Cadmus group, or also at you'll see at the end of the webinar, we have a link to a survey that you can take for small systems where you can actually give us suggestions for webinars that you would like to see.
So if you have joined us for a webinar before, welcome back. And as a reminder, to receive a training certificate, you must be registered or in a room with someone who is registered. You must attend the live webinar for 60 minutes. And if you're in a room with others who are not registered, please type the name in the questions box and we can get them registered and get their certificates. And we have been getting a little overwhelmed with the emails, so we really strongly encourage you to type the names in the questions box during the webinar. So with that, I would like to introduce Nushat Dyson. She has joined the Water Security Division of EPA's Office of Water in 2009, where she serves as a team lead for the Active and Effective team, which is responsible for increasing awareness of water sector interdependencies and outreach. With that, go ahead.
Thanks, Brooke. So today I'm going to share with you the new requirements for risk assessments and emergency response plans for community water systems serving population sizes greater than 3,300. So just a little bit of background about the Water Security Division, where this work originates. The Water Security Division serves as a sector-specific agency for the water sector specifically, and that just means that we're the agency that's responsible for ensuring that drinking water and wastewater systems are prepared to respond and recover from all hazards. So we work together with other partners in the water sector to develop tools and resources that will assist systems in improving their resiliency. So we developed the Water Sector Resilience Framework that we rolled out a couple of years ago to help utilities to be able to understand how to increase your resilience. You can see that framework provided here on the slide. The first step in the process is really to conduct a risk assessment and understand what your risks are at your specific utility. The second step in the process is a planning process. So now developing an emergency response plan based on the identified risks that you have and the threats for your specific utility, and then actually training on the plans that you have developed so that other individuals within your organization and those who are working and coordinating with you during the response understand what the roles and responsibilities are in order to ensure an effective response. The fourth step in the process is really, we all have to do that at some point. It's the response phase, right? It's not if we're going to respond, it's when we're going to respond, and making sure that you understand the resources, the processes that you need to undertake in order to respond as effectively and efficiently as possible so that you can move on to the final step in the process, which is recovery, getting your system back up and running so that you can continue to provide the vital services that you provide in the community. The first two steps of the water resilience framework are now required for systems serving population sizes 3,300 and above, that assessment phase and the planning phase. So today we're going to talk about America's Water Infrastructure Act, Section 2013. That act specifically replaces and updates Safe Drinking Water Act, Section 1433. You might remember this more as the 2002 Bioterrorism Act, which required community water systems to conduct a vulnerability assessment at the time. So now the vulnerability assessment has now been replaced with the risk and resilience assessment, and the emergency response plan is now also required as well. And so utilities, once they complete these requirements, conducting the risk and resilience assessment and then updating the emergency response plan, must now certify to EPA by specified deadlines that they've completed these actions. And then there's an ongoing requirement to review and revise both the risk assessment and the emergency response plan every 5 years thereafter, and to coordinate with local emergency planning committees and developing your emergency response plan, and there's a requirement to maintain these records for 5 years. So let's dive in a little bit more. Here are the certification due dates. So community water systems serving the population sizes that you see stated here on the screen have the set deadline. So we're on the small systems webinar, so I'm going to focus on those systems serving population sizes 3,301 to 49,999. So your deadline for conducting your risk assessment and certifying to the EPA that you have completed that risk and resilience assessment is June 30th, 2021. If you decide that you want to certify to us prior to that date, then your deadline for certifying your emergency response plan is no later than 6 months after the actual date that you certify your risk assessment. So if you decide to certify your risk assessment on June 1st, 2021, then your emergency response plan certification would be due on January 1st. So I apologize. If you certify on January 1st, 2021, then your risk assessment will be due June 1st, 2021. So no later than 6 months after the actual date that you certify your risk assessment is the due date for the emergency response plan. So what must be included in these risk and resilience assessments? As you can see here on the screen, first of all, the risk and resilience assessments do not only focus on malevolent acts. Our previous vulnerability assessments really focus on terrorist and intentional contamination types of events, but this new risk and resilience assessment must include the risk from malevolent acts and also natural hazards, because those are happening more frequently, and we want to make sure that utilities understand both their risks to both the malevolent acts and natural hazards. And then there are specific asset categories that utilities must include in their risk and resilience assessment. That includes pipes, conveyances, source water, water collection, and those others that you see listed there in the first block. The first block doesn't explicitly say cybersecurity, but cybersecurity is included there in that block. Then it goes on to cover monitoring practices such as your sampling and analysis plans, financial infrastructure such as your billing, use, storage, or handling of chemicals, and we're focused on the operation of how you're handling your chemicals, who has access to those facilities. Also ops and maintenance, so we want to look at the risk to your specific personnel as well as your maintenance procedures. And then it also may also focus on the areas that you see listed here, which is capital and operational needs for risk management as well. So I'm going to move on. I apologize, the slide is not advancing. Okay, so the previous risk assessment. So let's say you had a previous vulnerability assessment that you've conducted. This will help you to be able to meet the deadline of June 30th, 2021 for the smaller systems. You can utilize a previous risk assessment that you might have had as a basis to begin to start to build the required risk and resilience assessment. If you don't have a copy of the previous vulnerability assessment, you can request that from EPA and we can provide that copy back directly to you. But you can start there with that as a foundation. And then if you have added any additional components to your system, you want to make sure you include those in that new risk and resilience assessment. And then also you need to make sure that you cover the new areas, which includes cybersecurity and then also your financial systems as well. So you want to make sure that you cover all the requirements in the law, but you can really start from the previous risk assessments that you have and just make sure that you include all of the components and based on the current condition of your water system. If you've included or undergone some modifications, you want to make sure that those are included in this new updated risk and resilience assessment. So the other thing that we want to make sure that we provided for you guys as you started to develop this new risk and resilience assessment is some guidance to assist you with addressing the malevolent acts portion of your risk and resilience assessment. So we rolled out a document on August 1st. It's called the Baseline Information on Malevolent Acts Relevant to Community Water Systems. And this document helps your water system to identify specific malevolent acts that you need to include in your risk assessment, because you can't plan for the world of all malevolent acts. So we need to be able to identify and prioritize what are the specific malevolent acts that you should focus on at your utility. So this document helps you to be able to identify which malevolent acts you have the greatest risk to, so you can include those in your risk and resilience assessment. And it also provides the threat likelihood factors specifically for each of those malevolent acts. We've taken malevolent acts from the J100 standard, those individual threat scenarios, and we've grouped them into larger threat categories so that you're looking at a lower number of malevolent acts as you're conducting this risk and resilience assessment. And so as you're pulling together the factors that we utilize to be able to calculate your risk, which includes threat likelihood, that's going to be provided for you in this document, vulnerability, and consequences, you're going to be working to estimate those, and we're going to talk about how you can do that with the tool that we've developed in the upcoming slides as well. So the baseline threat document will help you to be able to look at broader categories of malevolent acts and help you to define what we mean by malevolent acts as well. And you'll receive that threat likelihood value as a starting point. We also have some threat-specific questions that we ask you to be able to identify whether you're at an increased or reduced risk for specific threat categories as well. And we also provide you with some additional information and resources that'll help you to be able to address your specific risk to the different malevolent acts that you might need to plan for. That document is available on our website, and we'll provide you the links to those. Now, once you've identified your specific malevolent acts that you need to focus on in your risk and resilience assessment, you want to start to actually conduct that risk and resilience assessment. We have a tool that makes it easy for you to do this. So the VSAT Web 2.0 tool guides you through the process of developing your risk and resilience assessment, and it complies with OWIA Section 2013. You can utilize a PC or a tablet to be able to conduct your risk and resilience assessment utilizing VSAT. And as we recalled on the previous slide, those individual variables that we need in calculating risk, which includes your threat likelihood, your consequences, and then also your vulnerabilities, all of those will be calculated for you when you're working through the VSAT web tool. So it helps you working through a step-by-step process and helps you to be able to truly tailor the risk and resilience assessment to your facility. And then in addition to that, it helps you to identify specific risk reduction efforts that you can be able to invest in at your utility to be able to reduce your risk and increase your resilience at your facility. We have a specific utility resilience index that helps you to identify what your true utility resilience is, and that helps you to then also identify specific projects that you might want to invest in your risk management plan as well. And then finally, as you move through the tool, there's a countermeasures portion of the tool that'll help you to be able to identify and conduct some real cost-benefit analysis on the types of countermeasures that you might want to invest in at your facility to, again, reduce your risk and enhance your resilience. So I'm going to move on to emergency response plans, because after you've certified that risk and resilience assessment, you now have 6 months to develop and update your emergency response plan and now certify that to us as well. So there are only 4 requirements for the emergency response plan. So there's 4 categories that we must cover. So there's strategies and resources to improve resilience, which we're calling resilient strategies, plans, procedures, and equipment for responding to a malevolent act or natural hazard. We're calling those emergency plans. Actions, procedures, and equipment to lessen the impact of a malevolent act or natural hazard. We're calling those mitigation actions. And finally, strategies to detect malevolent acts or natural hazards. We're referring to those as detection strategies. So before you start your emergency response plan, what you're going to do is, first of all, start by conducting your risk and resilience assessment. And then you're going to take the relevant information from your risk and resilience assessment and begin to embed that into your emergency response plan. You also need to identify any state regulatory requirements. Many states have specific requirements for emergency response plan content, and they provide their own templates. You can use their templates as well, but you just need to make sure that it meets all of the 4 categories that are included within OEA Section 2013. You also should identify and integrate local plans. Your emergency response plan should dovetail with other emergency plans in your community as much as possible. So be sure to identify and integrate your emergency response plan with those local plans. And then the law specifically requires that community water systems, to the greatest extent possible, coordinate with your existing local emergency planning committees. And so partnering with your local emergency planning committees, also known as LEPCs, allows all parties to understand your response processes and procedures that you're going to use whenever there's a drinking water incident. And then finally, you need to plan for the resources that you have. The resources that your utility owns or has access to are definitely a high influence on how you develop your emergency response plan, and you need to make sure that you plan for the resources that you currently have and can access. So what have we developed at EPA to help you to be able to meet this requirement? We have updated our emergency response plan guidance. We've developed an emergency response plan template and instructions. And so the template instructions, what it is a single PDF document that provides you guidance on how to develop your emergency response plan. And it also has useful links to additional information. But embedded within the PDF, there is also a blank ERP template in Word format that makes it easy for you to be able to modify to be able to meet your needs to address this requirement. So you can see here provided on the screen is the ERP template outline. This is what you'll actually see. The first section provides just basic information about the utility itself, but then the next 4 sections, as you can see here, are pulled directly from what is required by the law: the resilient strategies, emergency plans and procedures, mitigation actions, and a section on detection strategies. So I'm going to go through these quickly. So some basic information, you need to make sure that you provide all of that basic information up front, including having a personnel roster available. You'll list all the components necessary to maintain effective operation at your utility. And then you also should know the industry surrounding your utility, because that impacts your facility. You might potentially have accidental releases. You need to know how to respond to those and what types of materials you might be dealing with at your facility. And then also you need to have access to safety materials and important safety information and procedures to help protect your utility personnel. You should also have an accurate inventory of available resources. Again, as we mentioned earlier, you need to plan for the resources that you currently have access to. And then also you need to include key local services, so locations of nearby hospitals or other key logistical information that will be helpful in case you need mutual aid and assistance providers. And if they're going to arrive at your utility to assist you, it will be good to make sure that you have this information to provide to them. So here's an example of the template itself. So we'll walk through a few of the sections. So the resilient strategy sections, remember, first thing that was required by the law. That section includes emergency response roles, ICS roles, how you plan to communicate during an incident, and contact information or personnel and media outlets you plan to work with. So this is what we mean by resilient strategies. There are strategies and resources to improve your resilience, and you need to assign roles and responsibilities, identify your response partners, and how you communicate with personnel and the public. Moving on, this is what you'll see in the template itself. We include example text in the template. You can remove this text or it can be modified, but it gives you a good roadmap of what you should add in this specific area. Moving on to emergency plans and procedures. So the next step in the emergency response plan here, you're going to make sure that you include core response procedures and incident-specific response procedures. So core response procedures will apply to a broad variety of incidents. They're the foundation of the incident-specific response procedures, and they serve as an all-hazard response procedures. So things such as access, making sure that you can gain access back to components of your facility after a major incident, physical security, such as protecting your utility facilities, equipment, and vital records, is essential to restoring your operation. Cybersecurity, your utility should consider adopting cybersecurity best practices to reduce your vulnerabilities. Power loss, your utility should consider preparing for a loss of power and know what to do and to respond and recover from such an incident. And then also, who's planning to provide emergency alternate water drinking supplies? What does that plan look like for your specific facility? Moving on to sampling and analysis. So do you have pre-identified sampling sites and procedures for sampling collection of both known and unknown contaminants, chain of custody, and all of those things worked out? And then finally, the family or personnel well-being. Your personnel are more likely to report for duty or stay on the job during an incident if they know that they and their families are safe and cared for. So it's important to include those actions in your plan as well. So here's an example of what you'll see for core procedures and the template. Moving along, we have the incident-specific response procedures, and these are tailored to a specific incident and will align with the risk assessment. And the Water Security Division has developed what we call incident action checklists to all of the specific incidents that you see listed here on the slide. So you don't have to develop these from scratch. If you don't already have those, you can identify the specific incidents that are of greatest risk at your specific facility, and you can pull our incident action checklist and add those into your emergency response plan to be able to meet this portion of the requirement. So here's an example of what you'll see on our incident action checklist, and this is on the one for a cyber incident. So we already have those provided for you. Mitigation actions. In this section, it's important because it not only helps you plan for an incident, but it will help outline steps that can be taken to reduce the impact of risk from a future incident. It's more cost effective to mitigate the risk from natural disasters than it is to repair the damage after the disaster. So some examples, you could relocate water intakes, develop alternate source water options, and then construct flood protection barriers. So those are some examples of some mitigation projects that you might want to consider. So while you need to include these in your emergency response plans, it does not mean that you have to have actually already conducted these by the time it's time for you to actually certify. It's just identifying the specific mitigation actions that you need to take. And then the last section on your emergency response plan that's required is detection strategy specifically. And so these strategies range from simple strategies like see something, say something, to more resource-intensive efforts like sensors or cameras to monitor the facility. This is a new area, and it's something that was not included in the Bioterrorism Act. But it's important because timely detection will make a utility more effective and efficient in response to threats. More effective response will allow your utility to implement its emergency response plan as quickly as possible. So on this slide, you'll see our actual mitigation actions template example. And again, we pre-populated some things for you, and you can personalize this for your own use. Now, once you're done with completing your emergency response plan and your risk and resilience assessment, then you're going to have to certify that you've completed these items. So we have 3 options for you to certify. We have an electronic submission method, which is our preferred method. We have an email method and a regular method. So the electronic submission process is a simple 10-step process. You'll just go online, register for an account. You have to register and certify by PWS ID number. So if you're a utility that has multiple PWS ID numbers, you will certify by each individual PWS ID number. You're going to accept some basic terms and conditions, build your profile, and then confirm the information, making sure that we have you as confirmed with representing the correct organization. You'll validate your email, and then you'll move on to certifying your risk and resilience assessment or certifying your emergency response plan. Once you select that you're ready to certify, the certification statement will appear on the screen. You'll click Certify Now. You can print this page for your records, and then you'll also receive email acknowledgement as well. They'll provide a time date stamp with the actual time and the date that you go in to certify. Finally, the last thing that we have before you come back in to actually recertify in 5 years or certify in 6 months, we also provide you the opportunity to choose final disposition of those vulnerability assessments that you submitted to us under the Bioterrorism Act of 2002. So permanent disposal is what we're planning after the final deadline, June 30th, 2021. But if you would not like it permanently disposed by the EPA and you want that copy returned to you, we can do that. So you would select that final disposition choice here, and then you'll come back in 6 months for your emergency response plan, and definitely within 5 years for the recertification. There's also an email submission option. So we have created certification statements for both the risk and resilience assessment and the emergency response plan. So the certification statements that we have developed for you, all you will need to do is to download them. They're fillable PDFs. You'll fill out the PDF, and then you can email it. And again, we're going to provide you the links to this information. And then finally, those same certification statements, you're also going to download, and you can mail that information as well. So you can complete the online certification process, you can email the certification statements to us, or you can mail the certification statements to us. Those are the 3 options for certifying to us that you have conducted your risk and resilience assessment and your emergency response plan. It's important to note that you must certify to the EPA specifically, because EPA is directly responsible for implementing Section 1433 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, okay? So what happens if you do not certify in time? EPA's main goal is returning the system to compliance and protecting public health. However, Section 1414 of CIWA is an enforcement provision for Section 1433. So if a community water system fails to certify that they have conducted a risk and resilience assessment by the statutory deadline, then EPA may bring an action to require compliance and may also seek a civil penalty of not more than $57,317 per day of violation. Where can you find this information? I know I covered a lot of information for you, but we have a website with all of this information provided for you. In addition to that, I want to cover a few FAQs that we receive or that we've been receiving. Can you use another standard? Yes, you can. EPA does not require you to use any specific standard. You're not required to use the VSAT tool, nor are you required to use the emergency response plan tool. But anything that you utilize to be able to conduct your risk and resilience assessment and emergency response plan, it is your responsibility as a facility to make sure that they comply with all the requirements of OWIA Section 2013. Can you submit now? Yes, you can. Submissions, we've been accepting submissions for certification since August 1st, and we will be developing, explicit guidance to help water systems serving populations 3,300 and less with increasing your resilience. So the law explicitly says that we must develop this guidance, and so we're in the process of developing it now, and it should be rolling out by the spring of next year. Is there funding available for systems to conduct your risk assessment? So there is not set funding that's set aside for this specifically. However, the State Drinking Water Revolving Fund programs can be utilized to be able to conduct a risk and resilience assessment because they could yield a resilience project. So each state is managing this differently. Some states have already developed this program and they're rolling it out now. Other states are working on the development of how they're going to roll it out. So please check with your state SRF program. Who's qualified to be a certifying individual? Any designated utility representative is qualified. There's no other requirements. And then finally, how do we know what your population size is? So what we're doing is we're using the CIWS database information to determine your population size. So this law was signed October 23rd, 2018, which was the 4th quarter of 2018. So the CIWS database information that we have for your population during the 4th quarter of 2018 is what we're using to determine what your population category is, so that we'll know what your corresponding deadline may be. So we have conducted, as a matter of fact, already 12 in-person web accessible 8-hour trainings. We're going to be doing 8 more of those coming up in the spring of next year, so definitely stay tuned for those. They were well attended. At this point, we've trained over 1,400 individuals in those trainings, and so we definitely love to have you join us. So some things that we want to make sure that you take away from this, definitely if you want to stay informed on what's going on with water security and water resilience overall, just text resilience to 42828. If you text resilience to 42828, you'll be able to join our mailing list, or you can sign up online at epa.gov/water resilience. If you are serving a population size greater than 3,300, definitely conduct your risk and resilience assessment and certify by your deadline, and then update and develop your emergency response plan and make sure that you certify that no later than 6 months later. So here's my contact information. You can reach out to me via phone or email, and I'm here and happy to assist you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So before I introduce our next presenter, I just want to share a couple more reminders. There's a lot of great information in both these presentations, and the slides are available for download. And if you did join late, and if you have more than one person with you in the room, please be sure to list the number of people in the room with you in the chat box. And I have been seeing some great questions come in. Please continue to type your questions in the chat box, and we will get to them during the Q&A session. So with that, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Kirsty Dangle. Kirsty is an environmental and public health scientist with EPA's Water Security Division in the Office of Water. I do believe we have another poll that we're going to put up on the screen before Kirsty gets started.
Yes, please respond to this poll on your screen when you get a chance. Which interdependent sectors have you worked with? Please check all that apply. You can choose energy and transport, food and agriculture, chemical, healthcare, public health, and emergency services. It could be a few more moments to respond. And here are the results of that poll. So it looks like the majority are from healthcare and public health. Back to you, Brooke.
All right, great. With that, we will turn it over to Chrissy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, as mentioned, I'm Kirsty Dangle with the EPA's Office of Water, Water Security Division. I'm going to talk to you today about community-based water resiliency resources, some updated tools and resources that we have to help you all be better prepared between the drinking water and wastewater folks, working with your community and what we call interdependencies. So what I'm going to do, I'll just give an introduction of what is community-based water resiliency, or better known as CBWR. And I will be referring throughout the remainder of the presentation today of community-based water resiliency as just that, CBWR. I'll be reviewing, going through our new online training for CBWR, as well as our updated CBWR guide. Now this is an update from our previous CBWR tool. So what does water do for you? So communities of all sizes depend on drinking water and wastewater services daily to sustain human health and economic activity. Now I want you to think about how you use drinking water and wastewater in your homes, as well as your businesses, noting that a lot of you work in the water industry every day. So how do you use that when you go home at night? How does your family utilize water, et cetera, and how is it used at the workplace as well? So preparing for all hazard incidents, every day communities face a very real threat of water service interruptions from various circumstances, whether they're hurricanes, tornadoes, aging infrastructure, as well as the intentional contaminations that we plan and hope that never happen. Now these threats continue to increase each year, year after year, and the damages from these events seems to also increase as well, both in overall cost as well as the damage that is done. So I want you all to imagine what life would be like a day without water and how you would meet your needs for drinking water, having water available, the sewage disposal and sanitation. So it's not just water coming in, but how are we going to properly dispose of that if we have no water? How are firefighters going to be able to respond without water? Then I want you to think about what we call interdependencies, sectors that both rely on water and water relies on them. So if there is no water, how does this affect such sectors as energy, hospitals and dialysis services, to also include public health agencies and institutions? Transportation, how is that affected if there is no water for the day? How about food processing and services? How are they impacted? As well as manufacturing, lots of manufacturing factories, how can they be impacted and vice versa? And the banking industry as well. So we don't just consider our personal needs for water for the day. We also think about how this is a bit of a domino effect. When there is not water, it impacts our what we call interdependencies, and it affects us far beyond just having that cup of water to drink. So I pose the question to you, what if things were different? What if your community was better prepared to handle water service interruptions so that if there was a day without water, it could be handled properly? So promoting the understanding of these interdependencies helps enable water utility owners and operators, as well as their stakeholders, a chance to better understand how a water service interruption can be detrimental and cause very negative effects on the services they provide to the communities at large, as well as those interdependencies we just walked through, how they are impacted and how that can then impact the community as well. So community-based water resiliency, or CBWR. EPA's CBWR initiative provides communities with the tools and resources to be able to do just that. So this program helps prepare water service interruptions that happen in communities to help that be a lessened effect, so that communities as a whole can increase their resiliency. Now, CBWR aims to increase the overall community preparedness. How? By raising awareness of the water sector interdependencies, as well as enhancing the integration of the water sector into community emergency preparedness and response efforts, as well as increasing preparedness and resiliency of the drinking water and wastewater utilities by delivering tools and information that can increase community collaboration and bolstering preparedness practices. So as we've worked on this program over the years, we found not only does it help the water utility and the various interdependencies become better prepared for a potential water loss, this helps them build relationships amongst these interdependencies if there is another emergency beyond water. So it's more of an all hazards approach. It can help in various aspects beyond just preparing for a water loss. Our focus is on the water, however, it is very important to be connected should there be any other type of emergency. So to reach this goal of improving community resiliency, CBWR urges community members to take the first step in preparing for a water emergency. How? One of the ways is by holding a community discussion, and this helps collaborate on community goals. What do you want to focus on in your community? What are your challenges? The roles and responsibilities, especially associated with a water emergency. So sort of a who's on first scenario. When there is an emergency, knowing how to get a proper message out to the public, and so that there are not multiple messages going out from the various interdependencies in the water sector as well, so that everyone is on the same page communicating a very simple, concise message. Now, communities as a whole are more resilient in the event of a water service interruption when the utilities and those respective interdependencies are all talking and working together. And it's not just one sector releasing information, that they are all in the know before the public gets a general message. So many of us take drinking water and wastewater services for granted. Now, a lot of us on the line work in the water industry, so we think about this a little bit more. However, it's just an assumption. You turn your tap on, the water comes on. There's little thought given to what would happen if an emergency caused an interruption such as a water service. And what does that really mean? So help from state or federal agencies can take days, if not weeks, to arrive, which is why emergency planners emphasize local preparedness as a key step to maintain community resiliency. Now, I know we have a lot of small utilities on the line listening in, and I know it's very hard with limited resources to say, I don't have the time to reach across the lines and talk with these other sectors. If there is a way to build that in to planning, as far as emergency planning in general, that helps bolster this communication for a possible emergency. So a community discussion, which brings together these interdependencies, and often, as well as those who live in the community, providing an opportunity for folks in a community to have a very frank conversation regarding plans for interruptions to both drinking water, as well, don't forget about the wastewater services. And it also provides an opportunity to identify actual emergency water needs to make planning more effective. So when that water is compromised, how do we get backup water? Into which entities and how that happens and who is in charge of that, et cetera. So raising awareness of these issues in a community is a good first step to improving your preparedness. And by working together before an emergency happens, you and your community can be better prepared for water service interruptions. Now, taking a proactive approach to water emergency preparedness by embracing the CVWR program allows members of a community to do the following. So recognizing the importance of water and how the communities and businesses rely on it every day for their services. As each entity is going to have a different need, and they're going to also have a different need for backup supply plans as well. It's also important for forging those partnerships between the water utilities and their community. I can't stress that enough. If there is a bare bone message to all of this, it's just that partnership. Clarifying the roles and responsibilities of individuals and the organizations during a response to a water emergency, as well as increasing the community preparedness for those water emergencies, so that the community as a whole, to include those interdependencies and the citizens, are better prepared. And finally, reducing the impacts of those water service interruptions so that when water is compromised, it is reduced to the most minimal impact possible and folks are able to sustain. So I'm going to walk you through some of our tools, the two that I referenced that we've been working on just recently. The one is the CVWR online training. So this essentially is training to help increase the awareness of what I call the interdependencies and promote proactive community level preparedness for these water related emergencies. As you walk through the training, you're able to learn about how you can improve community readiness, and it gets you just thinking about your community and responding to a water emergency. Now it's broken down into 3 different sections. The one is going through those interdependencies, the water sector interdependencies. We have the second is scenarios. Various scenarios are presented. And then we give some knowledge checks along the way to keep the folks who are taking the training engaged and thinking about how they would respond. And then we also reference our other tool, the Community-Based Water Resiliency Guide, which was formerly known as the CVWR tool. So I have a couple screenshots from each of these tools, and I want to walk you through just to give you a preview of what these look like. So for the training, the interdependencies, we provide a map here of the critical infrastructure sectors for services such as the following: the healthcare and public health sector, the chemicals and energy. And you can mouse over each of the various interdependencies, and it gives you further information to help you understand how they work together. And you explore the different sectors in the community, and you understand better, just by the map and then the following slides, how those two rely on each other. We also have a training within the video called A Day Without Water. And again, it gets folks thinking about how to respond and react, and what would you do if water was compromised. So the scenario and knowledge checks I mentioned, this module, it goes through 3 different typical water and wastewater interruption scenarios that a community could experience. And then they're each followed by knowledge checks to help reinforce key information. And then we have also a training video called Don't Get Soaked. That's one of our EPA videos. And it highlights here the importance of community preparedness. The real-world examples that I mentioned. So the module covers 2 real-world examples. The one is the Colorado River flooding. And here there was significant flooding that washed out water mains and damaged the utility plants. We walked through and showed the impassable roads, how they led to lengthy water outages, as well as the flooding causing power and telephone outages. So that domino effect, as I explained earlier, of the interdependencies. And then we show how CBWR can help communities prepare for this type of water service interruption before it happens. The other real-world example cited is the Massachusetts water main break. This was back in 2010, where there were about 2 million customers that were affected, 64 million gallons of treated water that were lost, and the water was subject to a boil water notice. This affected the various sectors, restaurants, coffee shops. They couldn't serve tap water. The ice machines couldn't be used. Physicians needed to use bottled water for their health-related procedures. And a variety of critical sectors coordinated since the water main break to resolve the problem and eventually lift this boil water notice. Now you can learn much more about this real-world example and how it could have been modified throughout the reaction process. And they have learned so much from this that they have become a resilient community for any future water losses. Since then, the city conducts drills and exercises with those sectors to prepare for future water losses, so that should they experience a water main break of that extent, it's very concise and the interdependencies know how to react. Now the guide, as I mentioned, the guide is within the training, but it's also a standalone tool as well. Section 3 of the training goes through the guide, and it shows what you can learn from the guide, showing what the communities can do. And it just gives a brief snapshot of the guide itself. Now I'm going to walk through the guide here so you can see a snapshot of it in the training. The actual guide itself, there are 4 different sections. There's an overview, an opportunity to explore those water interdependencies, the Water Resilience Action Plan Kit, and finally, tools and resources and templates that can be used. So these are screenshots of the guide. The guide will be up for you all to view on our website very soon. Actually, we have a version now. We'll be promoting that further, so folks on the line, if we have contact information, we can direct you to that as well. So this gives an introduction similar to the training of CBWR and what it can do to help your community. We walk through community resilience and the need. And we also go over kind of the roots of CBWR within the EPA, our route to resilience, which helps bolster a resiliency framework of assessing, planning, training, responding, and recovering. Nishad had mentioned these 5 components earlier on before we went through AWEA, and this is so important when planning and preparing for any potential type of water loss. So an overview of the guide, and as I mentioned, the route to resilience. We walked through a little bit of the assessing, planning, training, responding, and recovering, what that means to your water utility and how to react. I'm not going to go through all this today for the sake of time, but I'm just giving a quick snapshot. Exploring the water interdependencies. So we cover 6 key sectors. Now there are numerous other sectors out there, but the ones that we focused on that water tends to work with the most is the energy sector, the food and agricultural sector, the chemical sector, the healthcare and public health sector, the emergency services sector, and the transportation system sector. And we go through each of those sectors. We do have the map similar to the training where you can walk through and mouse over. This is just a quick snapshot, but you can see much more in the guide itself. And what you can do when you get to this part of the guide is you click on each sector, and that takes you into further information. I'll do a quick scroll through here of some screenshots of the various sectors. And what we sought to do when we put the guide together was to demonstrate how each sector relies on the water sector. So for example, here for energy, how they rely on water, and vice versa, how the water sector relies on energy. Now, our past CBWR tool, we had much more length and information to the sectors. It was kind of a data hub. However, this is designed to be more of a quick go-to when understanding how to work with the various interdependencies. We give quick snapshots to the far right here of some examples, real-world examples, and then we have resources at the bottom as well. So this is very much a quick snapshot of the sectors. I'm just going to scroll through here again for the sake of time, our various sector slide screenshots. So this is the chemical sector, our healthcare and public health sector, again, another real world example off to the right-hand side, emergency services sector, transportation system sector. Now, the Water Resiliency Action Plan Kit. So we had this before in our tool. And for this, we've provided a kit of information for preparing for a community meeting or workshop in your area. And we provide you with information, short of us being able to get to every area of the United States, be it small, medium, and large utility. This provides information so that you can do this with bare bones, minimal resources, working together with your community. And we demonstrate what the workshop is, the roles and responsibilities, who would be the host of that workshop. It just gets folks thinking about how to plan this workshop, short of funding. We have suggested planning checklists for those workshops, how to facilitate or moderate a workshop, as well as suggested goals and activities of how you tackle this. Why would we want to do such a thing? Developing the agenda. So we have templates, kind of rip and run, to help folks put together what it is they want to accomplish in working with the interdependencies. Now, when we do the workshops ourselves, we always try to see if there's a possibility of having a water utility tour built in. That is so resourceful and provides so much information to those other interdependencies who don't deal with water directly. That doesn't always happen, but it's a suggestion because folks learn so much and think more about their water when they see it up front and personal. How to invite the participants. So again, we have checklists for how to do that, templates as well for invitations, registration form template, etc. We also have information about the document library as well. Activities and supplies, things such as your sign-in sheet template, things you want to have ready for the day of the workshop to prepare yourself, short of having funding to help plan this. Thinking about options such as how you handle lunch when you have all these interdependencies in a room for a day and you want to keep them there to have this discussion moving forward. And the materials, for planning for and preparing for materials for the day of the workshop, how you handle that. And then the final workshop preparations as well. Something as simple as a feedback form template, we make sure we provide that as well so that if you want to move forward with these partners, you know, even if it's more for the all hazards, the emergency response planning, this helps you with that to work with your various interdependencies, as well as a workshop summary template is provided. So those are just some quick snapshots. Given timing, I just wanted to show you a preview of what these tools and resources look like. The guide is up and can be referenced at the following website, or you can get to it via our webpage as well through the Water Security Division's homepage, or you can go directly to it here. The training will be posted very soon, and if we have the opportunity to be able to reach back out to participants today, we can let you folks know, but it should be very soon in the coming weeks that will be available. If you're interested in a workshop in your area, again, I wish we could go to every area of the U.S. We get funding to do a couple each year. If you are interested in that, feel free to contact myself, Chrissy Dangle, via email or phone, and learn more about us on our website. If you have a question, you can email us at our inbox as well, wsdoutreach@epa.gov. And I'm going to turn this back over for a very brief Q&A session. I want to thank everyone today for taking the time to listen to our tools and resources.
All righty, great. Thank you so much, Chrissy, and thank you to both of our presenters on today's webinar.